Hello, 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 and welcome to Nurturing Bonds, Strengthening Parent and Child Relationships. This is brought to you by the Well Counseling Group in partnership with Redeemer Presbyterian Church, and we are super excited to have you here watching either the live or the recorded episode. So I want to thank Redeemer Presbyterian Church, who created the 4-8 Fund to support the mental health treatment for people of color. We have been so grateful to be in partnership with them for several years now, and this series on parent support and parent education has been just a blessing. If you haven't watched all of the episodes, there are several that are available for you. And we have a couple more to go as well, but we're super excited about this opportunity to share this information with you today. So our goals for today is to talk about how to have a strong and healthy parent-child relationship. And I'm going to try because I am a parent of teenagers and young adults. So I'm going to try and go across the spectrum of parent and child relationships, whether you're talking about infants and children, all the way up through young adults. So if you have questions about that, feel free to chime in the comments if you are watching us live. And if you're not watching us live, you'll see some contact information at the end. If you have specific questions or need support with that, feel free to send us an email and we would love to help you with that as well. So we're going to talk about what creates a healthy parent-child relationship. We'll talk about some of the practices and activities that you can be doing to kind of promote bonding, respect, and trust between parents and children, which are all part of those healthy relationships. We'll talk about how you can identify some spaces for some personalized strategies for your specific child. Now, as we always do, we give this little disclaimer. We are giving you information that is intended for psychoeducational purposes. So if you apply these strategies, we do believe that they will benefit you from a psychological or an emotional standpoint. However, we are not giving you any specific medical advice. This is not medical treatment. If you have specific health concerns about yourself or your child's mental health, we do recommend seeking the guidance of a qualified healthcare professional, and I'll give you some contact information for that at the end as well. So my name is Kathleen Day. I am the Director of Operations here at the Well Counseling Group. I used to operate in the parent coach realm here at the Well, but I currently do more of our coaching and consulting side with our corporate partners. But I know all very well this parenting life because, as I said, I'm a mother of 4. And currently age 14 through almost 31 now. So I have been through all the stages of parenting, and I absolutely understand the challenges that may come. I would say that I have a relatively good relationship with all of my children, and it's something that I'm very happy about. But I'll be honest, it is also something that is a work in progress. Like it's something that I'm consistently committed to, because like any relationship, there's always work to be done. So whether you are struggling with your child right now or you feel like your relationship is pretty good, chances are if you're watching this, there's something that you would like to improve, and there will be some tips here that I think will help you. So I want you to understand and be clear that healthy parent and child relationships are worth the investment, okay? But I also I put this up here for a couple reasons, because I want you to understand that we sometimes, in most relationships, we have this choice, right? We are choosing to participate with someone in a relationship, whether that be a work relationship or a community relationship. We have this idea that we're kind of choosing this partnership. The parent and child relationship is the only one that we technically haven't chosen, right? We have our child, even whether we adopt our child or we give birth to our child, we have our child that we are caring for, but they didn't necessarily choose us to be their parents. And so there's already this dynamic of like a lack of choice, so to speak. But in most relationships, we think about how we have to invest. If I'm thinking about a husband and wife relationship, for example, there's some expectation that there's going to be someone pursuing, and there's going to be someone who is committed, and they're showing up and they're being present and they're putting in this time. The relationship between you and your child needs the same type of investment. And that doesn't go away. It can shift and it can change, but it doesn't necessarily end. So when we talk about bonding and having relationships with your children, one of the things that I want to make sure that we are clear about is this concept of attachment. Okay, so attachment is like in psychology, we'll talk a little bit about like this emotional bond between people that includes like these feelings of closeness, these feelings of security, right? We think of it very often in the infant to parent relationship, right? That your child comes out, they grab your finger, you're giving birth to your child, and it's like, oh, all of a sudden, our child, is they know mommy's voice, they know daddy's voice. There's this sense of, hey, I know that that this is where I belong. These are the people that I'm supposed to be with, right? It is a two-way bond, but it becomes strengthened through all sorts of these reciprocal interactions, right? So when the baby cries, you pick the baby up, right? The baby's hungry, you give the baby a bottle. The baby's wet, you change the baby's diaper, right? Over time, you smile, the child smiles back. You call, the child comes to answer. The child calls you, you come to answer. So these relationships become reciprocal, right? The healthiest relationships have these reciprocal interactions. I think it's really important to also note there's no single moment of attachment. It occurs over and over and over again. While we might say as a parent, like I loved my child the second that they, were born, the relationship is really developed over time. Now I have this image here of a rope and a knot. Like there's some knots on this rope. And if you look at this rope, I picked this rope because you'll see there's all these different fibers that make up the string of this rope. And then each of those strings is kind of tied into a knot. That's really what we think about when we say attachment. All these individual experiences, these moments that kind of all work together to form this connection between you and your child. Now, there are things that can disrupt that attachment, right? Things like having, medical conditions or separations or conflicts. Those things can actually disrupt the attachment process between a parent and child. But that doesn't mean that it has to stay disrupted, because you can be intentional and actually improve that attachment. And like we said, the investment in this relationship is worth it. Even though it may feel complicated and difficult and time consuming, it's worth the time. One of the things that we know is it promotes emotional well-being in parents and in children, right? If you have a healthy relationship with your child, it's good for you. If your child has a good, healthy relationship with you, it's good for them. So they are more likely to be emotionally communicative and able to regulate their emotions if they feel securely attached to you, if you've got that strong bond, okay? It can also foster independence and resilience. So I want you to kind of think about, a boat with an anchor, right? So if the boat is anchored or, kind of tied to the dock, that boat can kind of float a certain amount of distance and still be secure because of that attachment. So it can be resilient and kind of, fluid on the water and doesn't float too far away because it's still connected. So when you have a healthy relationship with your child, it's much easier for that child to grow up, to try things, to feel safe, to make mistakes, to go farther and still maybe not always getting things right. They might feel more confident that they can bounce back from challenges because of what you have given them through your relationship. We'll talk a little bit more about this piece, but it also builds trust and security. So if you want to have the kind of relationship where your child trusts you enough to be honest, right? And they feel secure enough with your relationship to tell you the truth, those kind of things actually happen because of the strength of your relationship. It can enhance your communication as well. I sometimes hear parents say like, well, my teenager doesn't tell me anything. All they just say is, single word or single letter text messages. They don't tell me a lot. But when you got that strong relationship, it makes it easier for them to communicate, right? And then I always say that a family is just a series of relationships, right? So if there's a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, what have you, even extended family members, each of those individual relationships is what creates the strength of the family bond. So your relationship with your child can actually make or break the overall health of the entire family. So you want to make sure that you put as much time as you can into that as well. But here's the truth. So let's be really honest. In our modern world, we have a whole lot of things that make it complicated and sometimes difficult to manage the relationship with our child, right? We've got so many responsibilities. There, expectations from work, complications from, family crises or physical challenges or financial challenges. It does require some intentionality, right? To kind of carve out these moments for connection. Very often we are not really spending as much time together as we really think we are. And for a lot of our kids, that makes it harder for us to be attached. So I want you to make sure that you go into, this fall season, especially if you have kids and, maybe they're going back to school, and recognize that the time you have as a family is just as important as the time that they spend with sports. It's just as important as the time that they spend on, homework. It's just as important as the time that they spend on their extracurricular activities. They shouldn't always have to give up family dinner time to participate in these different things. Those moments are important, right? Those moments of connection are what will help your relationship, those bonds, be strong. So some of the things that we typically see are busy schedules. When my older kids were younger, I always had this rule. I might have shared this in one of our previous episodes. I always had this rule that they could have one sport and one activity at a time, because I could not navigate, I have 4 kids. I couldn't navigate, 20 or 30 different things in the course of a week. So I say, hey, if you each have one sport and one activity, that means I'm juggling 8 different activities in the course of a week, plus my own life. And that is all that I can handle, right? So you want to be really intentional with how you set your schedules and what you allow onto the calendar for your family, right? Some of the other challenges that we often see, and the research is really heavy on this one, is technology, because everyone has their own device, or they're watching TV, or they're on their laptop, or they're on their phone, or they're on their iPad, or what different things. Those things actually distract you from the person that is sitting beside you. So that can be a challenge. Sometimes there can be like misunderstandings and generational differences. And this is really important, especially as your children get older, right? The old Fresh Prince, DJ Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince song, parents just don't understand. We've kind of thought that forever. That's a common thing that young people think about their parents. But those generational differences can sometimes feel like a big, thing to kind of bridge. And so they can lead to misunderstandings. I know there's a lot of people right now, when we're talking about like politics and the economy and things, that have really created some shifts, right? Some discomfort, that when people aren't willing to have complex conversations, or they're not willing to be honest, or they're not willing to hear other people's perspectives, it can actually create a rift in the family bond and the relationship. So hopefully some of the things we're going to talk about today will help you to navigate some of those things. So the first thing that I want you to do is make sure that you remember that the trust that you have in your relationship with your children is a foundation for what you are going, any of these practices that we're going to do, okay? And so trust is something that's built over time. It is built by, the investments that you put in. It is built by the showing up. It is built by the consistency that you have. What most people tell us, these are some things that most people tell us benefit them in terms of building trust. I want you to think, as I'm going through this list, about some of the people that you trust in your life, right? And this can be a parent for yourself, or an extended family member, maybe a supervisor or a boss, or maybe just a friend that you trust. Think about whether or not they check these boxes, okay? So creating a safe space, meaning that I feel like I can trust you to hear what I have to say, and this is not going to be thrown back in my face. I feel like I can trust you and share something with you, and it's not going to make it halfway around the block, right? I feel that you have the capacity to hold whatever I want to share with you. That creates trust, okay? Being honest. So as parents, this can be a challenge, because in order for us to be honest about certain situations, we have to kind of put ourselves out there and say, okay, I'm going to try this. I'm going to let you know how this feels. I'm going to let you know what's going on right now. Being honest sometimes as a parent can be really hard, because it makes us be vulnerable. And this is especially true as our kids get older. Now, obviously, we're talking about being developmentally appropriate. So I'm not expecting you to tell your 2-year-old everything, but if you have teenagers or young adults, you want to be honest with them about as much as you possibly can, because that builds that two-way trust. The other one, being consistent. There is no greater gift than you can give your children than the ability to show up and be consistent, right? Think about somebody in your life who you trust. Is that a person that you know that you can depend on, or is that a person that maybe they will, maybe they won't, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, but more times than not is what we're expecting. So your kids need that consistency, right? And you want to make sure that you're continuing to offer them that. Uh, I'm definitely a mom that will say maybe, right? Because I don't want to say yes and then the answer ends up being no. If it's more likely to be no, I'm probably going to say maybe, but we'll see. But I don't say yes unless I'm sure that I can do that, because I want to make sure that I'm being honest with my kids and being consistent. The other thing is important, and I believe this can go as young as your toddlers, but definitely all the way up to your young adults. When you have the opportunity, you want to offer choice, right? Hey, I can help you this way or this way. Hey, you want this for dinner? Well, we can have this or that, right? Those are the kind of things that you want to offer. Offer choice because it gives them back some of that control. And when we have some ownership and some control, we generally are more trusting, right? Because you're trusting me to make a choice. I'm trusting that you're going to honor that, right? So that is important as well. And then last but absolutely not least, we want to make sure that we are respecting boundaries. Now, there's kind of two pieces to that. Number one is that you're setting the boundaries and that you are allowing your children to set some boundaries, and that you are respecting theirs and holding them accountable to respect yours. So all of that is included in creating a mutually beneficial, trusting relationship. And I want to be really clear. This starts early and continues on as long as you and your children are alive, right? It may shift and kind of be reframed over time as they get older, but it's going to be there forever. So you want to make sure that you are consistently offering these practices. And this isn't about perfection. This is about, hey, I'm trying this today. I'm doing the best that I can. I had a good day, maybe not a good day. I really hit this one out of the park, but man, I struggled on that one. So you're not having to be 100% parent. You're just doing the best that you can most days. So kind of keeping these things in mind to prioritize trust. Okay, so quick practice, and if you're watching live, feel free to put this in the comments if you want to share, or you can unmute if you would like. What do you need to feel trust, right? What do you think your children need to feel trust, right? Think about that for just a minute. What helps you to feel trust in a relationship? And this might be with your children, or it might be with someone else. Like, what helps you to feel trust? So one thing for me is I only trust people who I know are going to be honest, right? If I have seen that you will lie to other people, I'm going to assume you're going to lie to me, right? That's my kind of assumption. So in order for me to trust you, I have to believe that you're a person who is a person of integrity and you're going to be honest. So if that's the way I feel, like I said, I try not to, I can't really think of the last time I lied to my kids. I might tell them the developmentally appropriate thing, which is, maybe this isn't in the budget or what have you. I might not give them all the specific details, but I want to make sure that I am practicing what I preach. So think about what it is that you need to feel trust, and think about what your kids need to feel trust. And I would also encourage you as well to ask them, right? Trust is one of those like concepts that can be a little bit abstract. And so it's something that kind of needs to be taught as well. So they may not use that word trust organically. It might be something that you need to teach. So I have grandkids now as well. And so one of the things, like I had my grandsons in the pool over the weekend, and a couple of them are pretty anxious in the water. And so in addition to putting on my list to remember next summer to put them in swim lessons, one of the things that I was doing while we were in the pool is like, hey, I said, kind of look at Mimi. And I said, look at me. Will Mimi let you get hurt? And they said, well, no. So I'm teaching them that they can trust me, right? So I'm saying like, hey, even though you're not really sure about this water, because this is a pool you haven't been in before, right? You know Mimi, and you know that I love you and that I care about you being safe and that I'm not going to let you do anything that will hurt you. And I'm right here with you. I would never leave you in this pool by yourself. So maybe they just need that extra affirmation or that extra, proclamation. So you want to make sure that you keep that in your mind, because that can help you in terms of building the relationship and even sometimes repairing a relationship when there's been damage in the past. Okay, the next thing that helps to build those bonds and create that healthy relationship is using effective communication. If you haven't watched our previous workshop where we talked all about communication, I'll make sure that I link that when I send out the recording to this episode. But we did a whole kind of workshop on the concept of effective communication. We want to always, always, always start by making sure that we are listening to what is being said, right? And I always say, don't just listen for what is being said, but listen for what is meant by what is being said. So sometimes kids don't always use the right words, or they don't use the words that we would expect them to use, or we would prefer them to use. That doesn't mean that what they're saying doesn't matter, right? So listen not only for what they're saying, but also what they mean. And one way to do that is by reflecting what you hear them say, right? So it sounds like to me you're really frustrated right now, or it sounds like to me you're scared, or it sounds like to me you're disappointed, or it sounds like to me you're feeling, a couple different emotions and you don't really know what to do with that. So kind of reflect not only what you hear them saying, but what you think they might be feeling. That creates and builds that bond. If you're like me, sometimes when you hear things, your first reaction is, I want to fix it, or I want to respond, right? If you can, you want to first show that you're listening, because that deepens and strengthens that communication. Okay. You also want to lead with empathy. This can be something that can be a little bit challenging for parents, especially if our kids are rubbing us the wrong way. And I speak this as a mom of teenagers, right? Sometimes we think like, oh my God, these kids, I never would have said that to my mom. I never would have got away with that. And we can kind of be frustrated. Which that's okay too, right? This is, we're perfectly as parents entitled to our emotions and our opinions as well. But what about leading with empathy, right? When you're thinking about what they might be feeling, or what's the feelings behind the words, that allows us to feel a little bit closer. That builds that trust, and it definitely develops a relationship. So you want to use open-ended questions rather than closed-ended. So a closed-ended question will be something that can be answered with a yes or a no, right? So did you turn in your assignment? Yes or no? That's a closed-ended question. An open-ended question would be, well, what happened with your assignment, right? So they might say, well, I turned it in, but I haven't gotten a response yet, or I'm really worried because I turned it in, but I turned it in a little bit late, or I got something turned in, but I don't think it was my best. So that's a totally different level of communication, as opposed to, did you turn in your assignment? So whenever possible, if you use open-ended questions, that can strengthen that two-way dialogue, that back and forth conversation. This is great for young kids as well as all the way up through young adults as well. And then you always want to validate emotions. And this is one that I think sometimes parents get slippery on. Sometimes I see parents they care so much about their children's emotions that they make their feelings the be all end all. And then I see parents on the other end of the spectrum that they want to ignore their emotions and say, hey, I don't care about how you feel. This is just what we have to do. You want to be somewhere in the middle where you acknowledge that their feelings are real, that their emotions are theirs and they are entitled to how they feel, even if there are some facts or some behaviors that need to change as well, right? So validating emotions is just saying like, hey, I hear what you're saying. You are frustrated. You are angry. You are disappointed. I hear that. But here's what we need to do. So validating those emotions means that they're entitled to have their feelings. And that might include they get to be angry with you, right? One of the things, so I work with a lot of educators, and one of the things that I sometimes see from, teachers and counselors and things is they want to control how kids feel about them. So don't you make that face at me, or don't you get mad at me, or don't you give me that attitude. Like, I can set a standard or boundary around the behaviors that I'm willing to accept, right? But that doesn't mean I get to control how they feel. So we want to validate that their feelings are theirs and that they have the right to those feelings, even when we need to address those behaviors. And the way that I usually describe this with parents is I say connect first and then correct. So you connect first by saying, like, I see what you're saying and how you feel, but here's how we have to do this, or here's what I need to do, or here's what I need to say, so that you can address that. And then be predictable. This is a key when it comes to building a relationship. We talked about that consistency piece. You see here, I've got a picture here of what looks like a child doing some homework, right? And I think that is one of those things that can get really tricky, especially if you are a working parent or you have children who are going between maybe two houses, or maybe there's some stresses or crises that are going on right now. You want to do what you can to create some consistent routines, even if that means that there's just like an anchor activity, right? So maybe every Sunday, we maybe can't guarantee what day of the week we're going to have dinner together, but every Sunday we're going to have family dinner. Or maybe every Friday we're going to have family breakfast. Whatever that can be, you want to create those anchors in your family and interactions. Very often those traditions that you have are what holds the glue. They're like the glue that holds the family together. So maybe it is, we're always going to have that 4th of July picnic, or, maybe we're going to have a big Christmas breakfast. You want to do what you can to create those traditions. And around those, you want to have boundaries. So you want your kids should know what you're going to say, right? And that's a really, really important point, especially as your kids get older. This is acceptable, this is not. And it's not harsh or mean to set that. We've come in this, current society where we hear a lot of people talking about gentle parenting, which I absolutely am a fan of. But I think people get this misunderstanding that gentle parenting doesn't provide boundaries or consequences or rules or guidelines. And it absolutely does. I can be a gentle parent and still say, this is what is acceptable and this is not. You're not allowed to do this because that's not okay. So you can be gentle and still set some boundaries. And honestly, the statistics on this are really clear. Kids who know that their parents have boundaries are actually better. When you have your kids do things like, hey, this is your chore, you gotta do your responsibility, you gotta complete your tasks, this is how you contribute to the household, those kind of things, those are actually really, really good for kids just as individuals, but then also on the level of your relationship with them. So be predictable with everything from your routines and traditions to those boundaries that you're setting for them, so that your kids can develop that trust. And then this one, I honestly kind of went back and forth about whether or not to share this. There's a little bit, and I'm going to say like minor controversy on this. If you are familiar with the 5 Love Language book that I think Dr. Gary Chapman wrote originally, it's now been translated into the love languages for teens and the love languages for kids and the love languages for teachers and all these different things. There's been a little bit of controversy about that because it's not necessarily the most scientifically studied concept. But for me, I think anything that has benefit to how we see people and understand people, whether it's been, anecdotally studied, I think it still has some valid points. So I believe that these love languages can give us maybe just a little bit of information about people in our lives, whether it's like it's not a diagnosis or a prescription or what have you, but it just kind of helps to spark that conversation and spark a little bit more of a deeper awareness. So there's 5 love languages: words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch. And the concept of the book is that each of us has one primary language, that this is the way that we best feel loved, right? So it's not to say that we don't like all of these things, but like one of these makes us feel the best. And so generally, your children have a love language and you have a love language, and sometimes those are not the same, right? So let's say you're a words of affirmation person and you really love when people verbally give you love, praise, and appreciation, right? So like somebody saying, "I'm so proud of you," or "You did a great job," or "Thanks so much, mom," that would feel amazing to you. But you might have a child, for example, whose love language is they really liked physical touch. They want someone to give them a hug or a kiss or a pat on the back. If you and your child have different love languages, you can be trying to express love and they won't feel it. Or they can be asking for love or trying to express love and you won't feel it. So whenever possible, you want to try to speak their language. So the first step would be to know their language, and the 5 love language quiz is available for free online. So you're definitely welcome to check that out. I would encourage you, if your kids are old enough to take the test for themselves, to have them take it. If they're not, you can kind of take the test for them based upon what you have seen in your interactions with them so far. The other love languages are acts of service. This is me. I'm an acts of service girl, which basically means you really like that people take actions to show that they care for you and are willing to help. So your kids might like you helping with homework or cooking their favorite meal, right? Like for me, I really love when someone cleans my house or, gasses up my car or something like that. Someone who's willing to do an act of service for me feels like love, right? Other people like receiving gifts. So this doesn't necessarily have to be the most expensive gifts, but it's the fact that you thought of them and purchased something. So whether it's something that was handmade or something that you created or you put it into a box or what have you, the fact that you gave them something specific and tangible is generally the benefit there. And then lastly, quality time is the fifth love language that we'll talk about today. And this is that undivided attention and time spent together. But honestly, I'm going to tell you a little story. I don't know that it even has to be undivided attention. It's just something as simple as playing a game together or having a family movie night, just being in the same presence with someone. I think, and again, a lot of us like all of these things, but it's just what we like the most is when we're talking about your love language. So one of my teenagers, her love language is absolutely quality time. And we used to laugh when she was younger. If ever she kind of was in a bad mood or she'd had, maybe like some, behavior wasn't great for, a couple days in a row and she was just kind of, wearing me out. I would generally be able to look back over my schedule and I could tell that she hadn't had a lot of quality time. So I would make some intentional time to make sure that we were together, where like maybe run through the drive-through and sit and have a milkshake or something like that, just to make sure she got that quality time. And that would almost always kind of, bring her back to who she normally was, right? And I actually have a picture of her that I share on social media sometimes of I was working in my office because I've worked from home for years and years and years. So I was working in my office and she was covered up in a blanket in the corner of my office with her little video game because she just wanted to be in my space. And she's 17 now and will still to this day, especially after she's had a rough day, will just climb on my bed and just be there. Right. And it's not necessarily that she wants to have a whole big old long conversation, but she just likes to kind of be in my space. And so when you have a child who has a love language that's different than yours, it can actually be easy for you to feel disconnected. So knowing that just gives you that one more little extra piece of a way to build that bond and secure that attachment. So I would definitely encourage you to use that. And again, it's not the be all end all. So I don't want you to think like, hey, you are words of affirmation and I said all these great things to you and you're still mad at me. It's just one way to help strengthen the relationship, and it can give you like a clue to kind of what they need. So a few more practical strategies. Make sure that, again, regardless of their love language, that you are spending some quality time together. And sometimes we think we've had so much time with our kids and we realize like it really hasn't been that much, right? Like maybe we were running lots of errands and we were taking them back and forth to practice and we were, we had to volunteer at the soccer game and all these different things, but they didn't really feel that quality time. So prioritize that and make sure that that is seen as just as valuable as any other appointment on your calendar. Share your interest and activity with your kids and listen to theirs. Sometimes we go above and beyond to make sure that we prioritize our kids' sports and extracurriculars, and they don't know anything about what we like or what we want to do. So make sure that you are sharing those, and when possible, participate with some of theirs as well. Make sure that you're giving lots of appreciation and positive reinforcement. So when you're seeing your kids do the right thing, tell them. We used to call that catch them being good, right? So rather than catching them doing the wrong thing and punishing them, catch them being good and show some appreciation for that. One of the greatest things that you can do for your relationship with your children has nothing to do with them at all, but it is just managing stress for yourself, and making sure that you are taking control of your schedule and managing your time. Very often, some of the conflicts that we see, especially as kids get older and parents are trying to navigate lots of different things, it has nothing to do with the fact that you all aren't connected or loving each other or don't have a good bond. It's just that you've got so much going on, you can't really feel it. So managing that stress in those busy schedules is a big part of making sure that you keep that bond strong. And then deal with any type of resistance or negative behaviors with discipline, not punishment. So when I use the word discipline, I think of the word disciple, which is, to follow or a follower, right? So when we are disciplining our children, we are teaching them how to follow guidelines, rules, values, morals, what have you. That's the goal. The goal is not to punish them for them to feel bad or to lose something because they made a wrong choice. That actually is damaging to relationships, okay? You do want to have, however, discipline, which is healthy for relationships. Because when you discipline someone, you haven't said that when you discipline your child, you're saying that you're worth my time to communicate with you and to teach you, right? When you're punishing your child, it feels like you're not worth my time. I'm disappointed in you and I just want you to go away, right? So you got to be really clear because kids can internalize a message that you never meant to send. Okay, so you want to focus on discipline, which is the teaching part, and not just the punishment. When I see people who, do things like, I'm going to have you sit on that wall and squat down, or I'm going to make you do calisthenics or whatever, that's just a punishment. It's not actually teaching them any skills. If they do something that is quote unquote wrong, you want to teach them the right way to do it. And that doesn't mean that there can't be consequences, right? So maybe the consequence of not cleaning your room is that you don't get to have the privilege of having this TV in your room. Like, that's a consequence. That's okay, right? But the idea is it needs to be logical, meaning that what they did, you want to have it connected in some way to whatever the consequence is. So I'm not going to have you scrub the floor just because you came in late from home, from your date or what have you. If you come in late from your date, then that means the next time you want to go out, you don't get to use the car, right? Hey, I'll drop you off and pick you up. That way I know you won't be late. Right? That's discipline. It's not punishment. So we want to focus on using discipline strategies, not punishment, because punishment can actually undermine the relationship that you have with your child. All right, so as we wrap up, if there are any questions, feel free to drop those in the comments right now or unmute if you would like to ask those live. We do have our feedback feedback form here that just asks you a couple of quick questions. If you are watching this live, I'd love for you to respond. You scan this QR code and give us some feedback. If you are not watching live, you should be able to scan this QR code. It just is a quick little survey. Redeemer Presbyterian Church are sponsoring this based upon a grant that they received, and the information that you provide actually will help them to continue to get these funding from the different grantors, to be able to provide these type of resources for everyone to participate. If there's any questions, feel free to drop those now or unmute if you'd like to ask. As we wrap up, I would love to just let you know that we definitely encourage you when you are having challenges with your child, or even if you're just having challenges on your own, we encourage you to participate in getting these resources for you. So for parents, the Well Counseling Group, who I am affiliated with, is accepting new clients. We accept several insurance companies. We have openings generally within 7 days a week. You can check out our website to get information about how to get signed up for that. And then if you have children, these offices, Indianapolis Counseling and Mentoring, Hope Haven, One Sensible Solution, and Children's Resource Group, are places where your children can receive care. And I do believe Indianapolis Counseling and Mentoring also does some family work for parents and children together. So if you really, I think that can be really beneficial if there has been maybe a crisis of some sort, or maybe a strain in the family. Sometimes having some work with you and the child can be really beneficial together. And I definitely encourage parents, if you're going to send your child, I would encourage you to get something for yourself as well, because as they're doing their work and growing and developing, you want to be doing the same thing. It can really have some beautiful impact on the overall relationship as a whole. But thank you once again for participating in this event. If you have other questions, please feel free to reach out to the Well at www.thewellcounselinggroup.com and let us know what questions that you have. Otherwise, we will see you at our next event.